Back to back national championship appearances. I want to even say national championships, which is crazy when you think about it, right? An offense that utilizes tight ends and tight ends with the lead as the leading receiver, pretty decent rushing game, turning a kind of a prospect or a project into a guy who's probably going to be a first round pick in Stetson Bennett. Is the Todd Monken hire enough to not only one, keep Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, but two, improve this offense in the ways that it needs to be improved? Or are we going to see a Ravens offense that is very similar to what we've seen the past couple of years? All right, what is going on, good people? Back at it again. Flock Nation Speaks. It's DJ here. Just a quick little video on this Todd Monken hire. Todd Monken, the new Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator. Of course, that is via a couple of sources, but the most reliable one being Wikipedia. No, they have updated it already. I mean, they updated it yesterday. They was quick with it. I think before the announcement was made, he was on Wikipedia already. But crazy to think about, because the Ravens claim to cast this wide net, where they were going to interview a lot of different people, right? A lot of different potential offensive coordinators, a lot of different guys from a lot of different positions, right? Some quarterbacks coaches, right? Some former offensive coordinators, right? Some guys who might have been former head coaches who want to, get back into that space, but the offensive coordinator is a good little bridge position for them. But they landed on Todd Monken, who I've heard they interviewed probably a couple weeks ago, and now they're finally just picking him after the Super Bowl. It was waiting till after the Super Bowl, smoke and mirrors, where you feel like maybe, just a couple of days removed, you're thinking maybe this is a move where they're going to say, hey, let's look at a guy like Eric Bieniemy, right? And I know the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, he had already got scooped up by the Colts. So it's very interesting, right? It's an interesting move, and I'll get into it here in a second. But my first question in regards to this is, what is wrong with Eric Bieniemy, right? It amazes me that a guy like Eric Bieniemy, number one, has not had a head coaching job yet. But number two, if his plan is to leave Kansas City under the shadow of Andy Reid and showcase he can do it elsewhere, why not Eric Bieniemy, right? Why not a guy that your quarterback probably can relate to, a guy who, has shown that he can develop a quarterback who came out of college as a guy who, I mean, even Mahomes has said, like, he said, like, in his third year, he didn't even know how to read defenses. So after winning the MVP, so a guy who literally has helped transcend Patrick Mahomes' career and scheme guys open and stuff like that. Like you can say what you want to about who calls the plays and who does this and who does that, but to still be there's been people with far less experience get more opportunities than Eric Bieniemy has, and it's kind of just crazy to me. But anyway, that's just my opinion on that subject. But it's also weird too, right? Like, why not even interview Eric Bieniemy after? Like, is Todd Monken a guy who is gonna be scooped up, right, by the time this week is out or something? Like, that's the thing. That's the crazy part about it, though. Like, I'm open to the idea, right? I think we all wanted anyone but you, Roman, right? We wanted anyone but Greg Roman. But is Todd Monken practically the same guy? That's the question. I think we wanted a pure overhaul. Now, albeit I've heard a lot of players come out, RG3 was one of them, that said this is a great move, not only for the Ravens offense, but for Lamar. But at the same time, like, when I look at it, right? When I look at it, and I know, number one, I think the talent on the outside was better. Of course, with I mean, pretty much what wide receiver you, as of late, at least it feels like, when Joe Burrow won the national title in his senior year. he had 5,600 yards, 60, which is ridiculous. 60 touchdowns and 6 picks, right? Like that. I mean, that's just a ridiculous season. I'm kind of curious to see like what was Tua's numbers real quick. I just want to see. I'm curious because it just makes me wonder how a guy like Stetson Bennett, who of course learned under Monken and his staff, like and the quarterbacks coach and stuff like that, like how different. So it's kind of hard with Tua because I think he was injured his last season, but the season before that he had 39, 66, 43 TDs and six picks. So, I mean, considering Stetson Bennett had in 2022, so last year, I mean, he went from 2862, so 2000, so an almost 3,000 yard season, right, to a 4,000 yard season in the next year. So I think that speaks well to the development that possibly Todd Monken can bring. But the other thing that interests me about Georgia's offense is once again the use of tight ends. Their leading receiver was a tight end in Brock Bowers. Very, very interesting, to say the least, because this is a double-edged sword, right? To bring in a guy who can utilize tight ends, it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, you have Mark Andrews under contract, you have Isaiah Likely under contract, you got Tony Kolar under contract. Two of those guys being under rookie contracts, literally going into their second year. Another guy, coming off of recently an extension. So you have to get a guy that can scheme open tight ends, but I mean, literally, BNM's been working with the best tight end. Anyway, it's crazy, right? Like it's crazy to think because you have to have a guy who can scheme up in tight ends. But at the same time, like when I look at, for example, his wide receivers numbers, they just don't impress me. I mean, shoot, like in 2022, they didn't have a wide receiver at all that could do anything. Their leading okay, I looked at that wrong, but still, like their leading receiver was at 762. So it's like it's not like I'm not impressed by and this is just me looking at the numbers, which don't tell the whole story. I'm not impressed by his usage of wide receivers. I mean, I am impressed by his usage of tight ends, but the whole goal of this whole offseason is to number one, sign Lamar Jackson. Number two, get a guy who can scheme open wide receivers, which you've been lacking in the past little bit because there's no use of redoing the wide receiver room if you don't have a scheme that makes sense. But I'm like I said, I'm open to it because I've seen a lot of positive feedback on it, right? But I've also seen some Ravens fans like, why not go in another direction? Why? What's the point of going with a tight end heavy offensive coordinator again? We've seen this story before. We know how this story works, right? We know how this story works. Why are we going in this route? So it's very interesting, right? It's a very interesting move. I'm open to it. And I would have to brush up on my Georgia film a little bit. I mean, but their offense looked good. Like they looked dynamic when you watch them play. The numbers leave a little bit to be desired, but when you watch them play, they look dynamic, right? They put up points. They're a top 5 offense in college football over the past 2 years, so like I get it, right? Like I understand the hire to a certain degree, but then, also, is that a big enough change, right? And the other thing that was very interesting is, and maybe a reason why Todd Monken came, right? Why you didn't get a Bieniemy or you didn't get a Byron Leftwich, or you didn't get one of those guys like, from somebody from the 49ers staff, perhaps, or something like that. Like the uncertainty of signing Lamar Jackson, which is the same uncertainty that Marlon Humphrey dealt with when he was trying to recruit at the Pro Bowl, right? Like, there's uncertainty. If there's uncertainty around who I'm going to be coaching, it's going to be a little bit hard for me to sign this deal. Of course, the Ravens have the money to sign guys to highest paid coordinator deals. Greg Roman was just one of them. So It'll, and I think Wink was before the couple years before that. So it's just interesting. I think like we said before. I mean, objective number one is to sign Lamar Jackson. I don't care who the offensive coordinator is if Lamar Jackson's not on the team, because that's gonna put you into a hole. And I want to do a video uh, on what possibly be like and I'm gonna pose this question out to y'all, and then I'll probably answer it in a video, in a few days or next week. Would losing Lamar Jackson be the biggest fumble in Ravens history, right? Because you have a chance to truly compete, to truly contend. If you put literally one or two more pieces around Lamar Jackson, you can contend. You can be, for lack of a better term, worst to first, right? Like you can be exactly where you want to be, not only going into next season, but next season, period. And I do want to talk about the disappointment of last season too, but I'll talk about that in another video as well. But it's interesting, right? It's an interesting hire, looking at it, because of course Monken, his experience, he was with the Browns. I know. So this is the interesting part of it. So there's positives to both sides, because you're looking at the fact that Todd Monken coached the Browns when Baker had his best season. He was their offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator and receivers coach during the time that Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick had some pretty good seasons under that umbrella with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then with Georgia, we've seen what he can do offensively. So I mean, I think there's a silver lining, but at the same time, like, once again, like we've talked about needle movers. I think we've talked about this all year long, right? Is Todd Monken a needle mover? Like, I hope he proves me wrong, but my fear is Todd Monken is not a true needle mover. But at the same time, I think I'm going back and forth with it. You can see it. You can probably read it on my face. Like, I'm going. You can hear it in my voice, read it on my face. I'm going back and forth with it, because on one hand, Todd Monken is a guy who has had successful offenses, right? And he does lean into the run game, right? Like, I mean, he leans heavy into the run game. I mean, you had a guy with almost 770 yards last year, and then you had a guy with 829, right? So he leans into his running game a lot. But like, you don't want to go backwards either, right? You don't want to go backwards. You don't want to go into the same. You don't want to go into the same circle over and over and over again, the same kind of cycle that the Ravens have been in over the past couple of years. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But Todd Monken, the new Ravens offensive coordinator, like I said, I think overall I'm optimistic, right? Overall, I'm optimistic. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if it's it's worth it, right? We'll see. And like we talked about before, like the fact that they still can't, it's just crazy. Like the fact that they still can't put any sort of guarantee on the fact of Lamar Jackson staying. You have the money, right? You franchise tagging him makes it harder for you to build around this new Monken system to begin with, right? You franchise tagging him makes it hard for you to add the pieces that you want to add, wherever that may be, right? So the main thing is to get the deal done, and we'll see how Monken does from there. And I'm sure Monken would benefit from Lamar Jackson being his quarterback as well. But anyway, as always, definitely hope you guys enjoyed the show. Like I always say, you can always watch or listen to Flock Nation Speaks on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Facebook as well. I do stream on Facebook too. So be sure to wherever you may be, give a like, give a share, right? Give a subscribe if it's applicable, right? But definitely hope you guys enjoyed the show. We'll see you guys on the next one. Todd Monken, the new Ravens offensive coordinator. But is he a needle mover? Let me know down below what you think. We'll see you guys on the next one. Until